link you guys after as well. So welcome everyone. This is going to be our final meeting for the fall when it comes to flag football and considering it as a demo sport for the 2023, this coming fall season. Zach here from Special Olympics Maryland. Thanks for letting Michelle in. Melissa Angers here from our community program. She is our flag football. Actually, gotta mute poor Michelle there. And then we also have Mike Sarnowski, who's our VP of Sports. Essentially, the agenda for tonight is I will give you some reminders on Plunge, because Plunge is coming up, just to take down some notes. Then we're going to go through some kind of key concepts of what is flag football for unified sports and IUS. What would a demo season look like? What are some of the rules that you will see in the Special Olympics International rules, and what our coaches guide / rule book would be for IUS? And then just talking about expectations and commitments if we move forward into hosting flag football for a demo season next year. And then we'll kind of close it out with what I'm calling a vote for implementation. We don't need to necessarily vote to implement across the board one way or the other. We just want to see what districts vote yes to have flag football, so we can start the program up and build a foundation for it. So we'll talk a little bit more in depth once we get to that point at the end. If you have questions, feel free to raise your hand or unmute. We don't have a huge group here. I also have the chat up on my second screen if somebody wants to type something in there. I will have question and answer kind of sections after each one of our main sections that we go through. But if there's a point that you want to make or a question you want to ask as we're going, feel free to hop in. It's probably pertinent at that point to make that question happen. Plunge, again, remember that Plunge is on February 2nd. We do a hybrid approach, so we will be at Sandy Point State Park, but you can always do a virtual Plunge from your school or home or wherever you would like to do it. I do know that there are some school systems with restrictions on water-based field trips. Again, if you are interested in Plunge, there are things that we do to support getting teams to Plunge. The best thing you can do to find out more about Plunge, honestly, is just reach out to Jessie Hayes at the bottom. That's her cell phone number. That's her email. She is in charge of Plunge, and she can get you the most up-to-date information. And I just wanted to remind folks again, NFHS offers the Coaching Unified Sports Training. We're pushing people to do this. We want to get more coaches through here, especially if you have new coaches, really good training for them to go through. If you don't know who I am at this point, I can't help you. That is my cell phone number. That is my office number. As you may know, I am home more than I am in the office. So please call my cell phone number. Please send me a text or email me. So we're going to start off with what is flag football in the context of unified sports for Interscholastic Unified. First of all, it's non-contact football. May sound a bit of an oxymoron. It is to a certain extent, but for the most part, we take out the aggressive contact nature of football like most flag football tends to do. We will have various levels of skill support for our flag football. We will have individual skills competition. Melissa Anger and I talked through that pretty good today about the various levels of athletes that can compete in individual skills. And they're actually working as part of the football sports committee for the state to tweak skills a little bit that'll actually even make skills more inclusive for more people, quite honestly, especially those in wheelchairs and walkers and so on and so forth. And then we'll offer various levels of unified team competition. So it's not the same concept as the different colored balls for tennis, but we'll probably have some high-level teams. We'll have some mid-level teams. We'll have some low-level teams. It'll still be team football, but based on their assessment scores and how they play as a team, we'll have some levels built in for what the divisions are. It's a team-oriented sport. It's similar to bocce, where you get more participants from your team on the field at the same time. Track and field, strength and conditioning, tennis to an extent. It's kind of individual, but you do it as a team on the same day. Tennis, you get a doubles pair on a court, but this is, 5 athletes and unified partners on a field at a time. 2 rotations of athletes and unified partners potentially. It's a bit more of a team game throughout the whole thing. And it's one of the fastest growing Special Olympic sports that has been coming up in the past decade or so. So just so you know what the team requirements are, and there's some conversation down the line implementing flag football we would have to have along with this. The maximum roster for teams right now is 12 players per team with a minimum of 8. If you look in the Special Olympics International Rulebook, it says a maximum of 10. But in Maryland, we've bumped pretty much all of our team sports to have additional roster spots besides for softball, just because 10's even pretty low. If you have to have 5 people on the field for a team for flag football, if you have a team of 10 and 2 people don't show up, you're already at that minimum. So we've given it a little additional flexibility. The one thing that this maximum does not include is including skills players into this number. When we talk unified sports, going back to tennis as an example, rosters can be, up to 10 or whatever they may be, including your skills athletes. This number of a maximum of 12 per team does not include that, because that's not something that's in consideration for the community program for flag football. Individual skills for the community program participates as a totally separate thing and doesn't get factored into teams. So we'll have to talk about that. Melissa Anger and I had some conversations around that today. We have an idea of how we may implement that for unified sports. But it's just something we'll have to talk about as we go down the line for flag football. Again, 5 players on the field. Teams are 3 athletes and 2 unified partners on the field at any given time. That's the basic team setup. That's basically what you see on the field. Other than that, when it comes to team requirements, it's the typical IUS stuff: application for participation in CDWs for students, Class A trainings for coaches, volunteers, managers, paraprofessionals, whatever it may be. And then you got to submit your team rosters when we need your team rosters. Team assessment form. This is the assessment form that they use for the community program. Again, just like any other sport, just like the assessment you do for indoor or outdoor bocce, just like the assessment you do for tennis, it all comes down to, we need this for divisioning your teams, getting them to play the right other teams. I will say Melissa Anger in the community program uses this to put teams together, but more than anything, she uses competition and seeing teams play in qualifiers to really pair teams up for good competition. So we will use this as well if we do flag football, but know that seeing competition really is the best way to judge a team's ability level overall. Again, with tennis, it's relatively closer when you have assessment scores of knowing this is roughly where they are. And when you pair them up with one other person, that's roughly where they are. But when you take a single assessment score for a single individual for 10 individuals on a team, you get some more variance. Hence why watching team play at a competition typically helps establish better divisions in competition. This is the assessment form. And so one thing that Melissa Anger did say today is height and weight is going to come off of this. Nobody really uses it. It doesn't really help anything. But you see all these sections off to the side here, and they'll make sense in a little bit when it says passing, receiving, routes, defense, so on and so forth. Just like tennis, we have a rubric that we would use to assess players. They would go through a series of skills, or they would go through a series of competition like we do with tennis assessments. They would get graded on 1 through 6. And all of these, just like we do with the tennis rubric, and that's how we would do our assessments. This isn't anything that you need to really internalize or take deep notes on or anything. We're just sharing the process, the information that we would use for the process. If flag football goes forward in certain districts, we'll have trainings on how to do this. We'll come out and help do your assessments. We will support you to make this happen. We're not expecting you to look at this, understand it tonight, and really have a good game plan or feel for how this is implemented. We just want you to know what exists, it's part of the process, and how it works. Questions up to this point, especially on the assessment concept and team size, roster composition? Okay.
Hey, Zach, real quick, I just,
Yeah.
going back to the Comar, I would assume flag football would be the same according to Comar as football.
Yes.
Okay.
It's in the same bucket. It probably is one of those things where you won't run into that Comar issue because it's in the same season. But again, you couldn't have somebody that played varsity or junior varsity the prior year participate in unified flag football. I think there's a gray area when it comes to Comar about individuals that try out for a varsity or junior varsity team and don't make the team altogether. I think there's an opening there. But again, as I've mentioned before with Comar in our pre-competition or preseason webinars for other sports, you have to talk to your supervisor of athletics for your district. Some places do Comar just a little bit different because it's up to various interpretation. Does that make sense, Roy?
Yes, thank you.
Cool. So in the community program, here's some pictures. These are all unified team. Anger, the bulk of your flag football teams are unified?
No, the bulk of them were traditional. This year we had 11 traditional, 6 unified, but they play against each other. So we have what we call open divisions. They play against each other. It's just whatever the best competition is.
Cool. But so I also wanted to show a little bit of a video. And a lot of the things that they do in the community program are the same things that we would do for unified sports. So here's a little clip of Fall Sports Fest. It looks like it's from 2019, 2020, 2021?
2021, I think.
Okay. It definitely wasn't this year, though.
And these are our top 2 teams in the state, both unified.
So it gives you a pretty good visual for what the process is. What you're looking at here this is our midfield line, and you see these striped lines. It has to do with these no run zone concepts. Essentially, we have built in through Special Olympics international flag football rules. Within 5 yards of the midfield line and the end zone, you can't run it because teams would just run it and power it over for a first down and or a touchdown. So it forces teams to have to pass the ball over the midfield line if they're starting here and need to cross the midfield line. You can see it's a 5v5 game. Most teams do a center and then 3 receiving options and a quarterback. The nice thing is that these are both unified teams, and they are quarterbacked by athletes, not by unified partners. Yep. So again, he throws it away, but it gives you a little bit of a visual of what it looks like in motion. First pause here. I'm going to ask again, any questions, comments, concerns, discussion around team composition and assessments and just kind of the basic intro to what unified flag football looks like. Haven't talked rules yet, haven't talked what our potential layout for a season and stuff would look like. All right, I'm going to keep rolling. So now we're going to talk a little bit about a demo season, what that is, what an outline and discussion could be for what a demo season could look like in fall of 23. A demo season is building a foundation. If we're going to introduce a new sport into unified sports, we want to build a strong foundation. We want to get our feet wet. We want to get schools and athletes playing and participating in the sport. Just kind of get the wheels going, right? One of the big focuses in a demo season would be strong training opportunities. We have required coaches trainings with field trainings. I know a lot of you guys, for your coaches trainings right now, they are either virtual or classroom sessions. We would support a field training session with what's the word I'm looking for? Flag football clinicians from the community program. We have 2 or 3 really good ones. Melissa's really good at running them. I can run them if I need to. She lets me come in, officiate games when she really needs me. So I do have a good idea of how this works. And again, we want to focus on training our student athletes in the fundamentals before we really take off and try to sprint. We don't want to sprint out of the gate. We want to crawl, we want to walk, we then want to sprint. For a demo season, we would offer district and or regional tournament support, but we wouldn't do a state tournament. We want teams focusing on week-to-week training. We want them focusing on week-to-week competition, and then a district or regional level tournament, not focusing on how do I get the states in the first year. The goal isn't how do I get the states, it's how do we build a good football program for our unified sports team. So with a demo season, when would we have a state competition? Well, if we get through 2023 offering flag football, things go well, training went well, teams, latched on well. Ideally, it could be as soon as 2024 in the fall. Big thing is we don't want to rush the process. We want to make sure that besides for quality training, quality understanding of the sport, and safety of the sport for our teams, we also want to make sure we find a strong facility for a state tournament. We want to find officials. We want to find volunteers that can support a quality state tournament experience for your student athletes. Again, we don't want to force anything in the first year. We want to build that foundation, and hopefully sooner rather than later, we get to those next steps. So when it comes to expectations for training in a demo season, we would have different trainings that we would like to run and work with you guys on to create that foundation. We would offer a typical preseason webinar in June like we do for tennis. Any of you that do tennis, we do our preseason meeting in June, and then we do another little startup meeting when the season is coming. We would also do a more in-depth rules review with district reps, just so you guys have a better sense of what the rules are, so that you can ask questions if you have detailed questions about the rules, and we could build a strong foundation for you to support your coaches and your teams. Most of you know how to do the typical interscholastic unified paperwork and turn in this and games management system information input through your LSS managers. We want to make sure you can support them from a sport aspect as well. When it comes to coaches, we still want to do that preseason coaches meeting that you would typically offer, and we would work with you to split into two parts. Essentially, we would want you to lead the district rep part that you typically do with the information session. When do they need to have paperwork in by? What deadlines do they need to know? What competition webinars do they need to be on? What rule book stuff do they need to know? We'd want you guys to facilitate that as usual, but we as SOMD would lead an on-field session after your in-classroom session. We would go through some drills. We would go through the different positions. We would teach them about, picking plays and crafting plays, so on and so forth. We would go through the actual football and sports specific stuff on the field. Student athletes, we would really like to push to do 2 training sessions a week for student athletes for the demo season. It can be 1 on field, it can be 1 off field, it could be 2 on field, whatever works for your field availability and your team. But we want them to get more than 1 training session a week, so they learn the game and they learn how to play the game safely. So once they get to competition and they're excited, it doesn't become an unsafe environment. Competition expectations in a demo season. We would want to do 3 competition days prior to the district tournament. So just, 2 teams, either you could do 2 teams meeting up, you could do 3 teams meeting up, you could do a competition day where you have all your teams show up and they play a round robin format and do at least 2 games per team. That's the dream. We would work with you on that, but we want multiple competition experiences prior to a district tournament or regional tournament. And then we would work with you to host a district tournament or a regional tournament. Again, we're open to possibilities, but we would want that final competition experience like they typically get with a district tournament format. The last thing we would want to do in a demo season is around this time next year, saying that we put together a football season. We would like to meet to do an evaluation. We would meet with you as district reps. We would want to get feedback that you get from your coaches over the course of the season, from your students over the course of the season, from you guys straight up over the course of the season to determine a few things. One, how the season go. Two, what can we get better at? Three, what are things that we might have just missed altogether implementing a new sport? And four, if we did all those things well, is it time to have a conversation about a state tournament in the following year? We would also like to send a survey and evaluate the season to your student athletes, your coaches, to administrators in your building. We haven't had a lot of success with surveys in the past to the student athletes and coaches and such. I think last year, coming out of track and field, we sent a survey and I got roughly 4 responses out of all the people that went to track and field. Pretty low response rate. So we would like you guys to work with us and your school systems to do an evaluation. Maybe it's not over SurveyMonkey. Maybe it's something that we give out to students in a class or at final practice or whatever it may be. But we'd want to do a season evaluation to determine where we stand at the end of the fall of 23, going into the following year for our second year of flag football. I'm going to pause again. Questions on training expectations, competition expectations, and just overall evaluation for a demo season, format of a demo season, competition numbers, district tournaments, questions on that stuff. And the answer can totally be, Zach, we're hearing this for the first or seeing this for the second time. I'm still thinking. I will have to go to X, Y, or Z people before I really have an idea or have questions. That's fine too. We can always do follow-ups after this. You can call me, email me, text me, whatever it may be. Flag football rules. We're not going through the whole rule book. I put a nice big slide here. These are rules reminders. These are key rules. We're not going through the whole rule book. I sent the flag football rule book from SOI to you guys. I think most of you have gotten it multiple times at this point. If you have detailed rules questions, we can take them offline and go over it. If there's anything that you have question-wise as we go through the rules, again, unmute, raise your hand, type it into chat, and I will do the best to answer it. It's also why I have Melissa Anger here in case I can't answer it. So when it comes to equipment, this is important. These are things that we'll have to work together to figure out who has what already, who needs what, and go from there. When it comes to equipment rulings for uniform or participation stuff, the football size that we use is the youth ball or the intermediate. Think of the flag, it's bigger than flag football. It's the football size for ponies and super ponies. I don't know what the first 2 levels of your Pop Warner football are called here. That's what it was called in New Jersey. But the first 2 levels of Pop Warner football, when you start tackling, that's the football size that we use. A mouthpiece must be worn at all times. Something that I know Melissa Angers talked about, and something that came up when I was officiating is athletes, some of them don't like the single mouthpiece. Sometimes they want the one that comes out and sticks out on the outside. It's a little easier to hold in their mouth. So it doesn't matter what mouthpiece they have. They just need to have a mouthpiece. The flags that we use are it's one big belt and the flags are attached to them. The flags don't individually come off. The whole belt comes off when you pull the flag. Those are the flags that we use. Some sort of rubber cleated or flat sole athletic shoes, depending on if we're on turf or on grass or whatever it may be. No metal cleats are allowed. And then some sort of matching uniforms and shorts without pockets. Typically, we're not worried about what type of shorts you wear. When it comes to flag football, no pockets is the best because sometimes you get a hand in the pocket and instead of losing flags, someone's losing their shorts, and that's never fun.
Or they break their finger because they get caught in the pocket.
Yes.
And they're grabbing for the flag. That's the biggest issue.
Yeah. Listen, I'll break a finger. I don't want to be the guy losing my pants on the field, though, Anger. All right. When it comes to field equipment that's needed, every field needs 8 pylons, typical football field setup. You need cones for marking those no run zones, which you'll see on a field layout coming up soon. Yard markers for 10-yard line, 20-yard line, and the goal line. Again, 60-yard field is what we use. You don't need all of the lineage markers. And then we use poly spots to mark the line of scrimmage and the rush line. We don't use the typical down and distance markers with the chains. It's a lot easier to use poly spots. It's a lot easier for the athletes to perceive the poly spots right on the field instead of having to look down to the sideline as well. Here's your field diagram and what the field looks like. It's 60 yards long and 25 yards wide. When we were at Troy Park for Melissa Anger's qualifier that she did, we got 3 fields on one soccer field, right?
3 of our fields go sideline to sideline on a full-size football field.
There you go. So in theory, if you have a practice field that you can work off of, or if they'll even let you on the main football field for your school, you should be able to get 3 fields no matter what you're doing, which is great. These are the no run zones, and I will do my best to explain them. If you are the team starting with the ball down at this end where the 25-yard marker is, tells you how wide the field is. If you are coming out of this end zone and going to your left, the first no run zone that you encounter is by the midfield line. This no run zone, you can't run the ball in before the midfield line. You need to cross the midfield line to get a first down. That's why it's there. Once you pass that, you're fine. If you start a run play prior to that and run through it, perfectly fine. You just can't run the ball if you're within this area. So if the line of scrimmage is within this area, you have to throw the ball to cross the first down. Same concept goes for the end zone here. If you, on the previous play, run and get your flags pulled off in this no run zone before the end zone, you have to throw the ball to score a touchdown. It's a safety precaution thing. Again, we don't want people running the ball and jamming it over the first down line. We don't want people jamming it into the end zone. That's fine and dandy when you're all 200 pounds and wearing pads and helmets and stuff. When you are playing flag football, and like most of us, you are relatively not gigantic, like NFL and college and high school players are, it's safer to have no run zones. And again, this is something that we will go over with coaches training very much. I'm not going to go through all of this. This talks about live and dead balls for the field of play and situations. The biggest one to know on a dead ball and turnover is for interceptions for unified flag football. Wherever the interception happens, the ball is dead. There's no return of the interception. That's where the other team takes over. It's just a turnover on downs wherever the ball was caught. Again, we don't want people catching the ball in the interception and running it back. Turns out to occasionally be a dangerous play. Is there anything you want to add with live and dead balls and interceptions, Anger?
Yeah, so the interception, I mean, like Zach says, stops on the interception. If it's caught within the 5-yard line or in the end zone, if it's intercepted in one of those 2 positions, then it starts at the 5-yard line. Every ball, every turnover starts at the 5-yard line except the interception.
There you go. Here's probably the biggest thing. When I have mentioned flag football to people throughout the tennis season, just kind of testing the waters, the biggest question has been, okay, we have unified partners. How do we make sure unified partners don't take over the game? The biggest thing is that a unified partner cannot throw the ball to another unified partner. So most unified teams, at least in our community program, have an athlete as a quarterback, because then they can give the ball to anybody that they want. If you have a unified partner as a quarterback, they have to give it to an athlete if they're throwing the ball down the field. So it's one of those things that kind of keeps equitable play in check and keeps things even for teams. Anger, do you want to add to that?
Yeah, so I would say when Zach and I were talking about what team sport we could add into IUS, I think football was the first one that came to my mind because it's the one where partners really cannot dominate this game. Like Zach said, partners cannot throw to a partner. So 90% of the teams, the quarterback is the athlete, because then you get 4 receivers instead of just 3. If a partner is a quarterback, they can hand off to the other partner, but that also limits them if they can't run anywhere, depending on the defense. So of all the team sports, flag football is the one where the rules really limit the partners in this one way, but it makes it the most equitable on the field.
So before I go anywhere else, since I know this was a topic of conversation and being brought up when flag football has been mentioned, does anybody have questions about unified partner and equitable play, and making sure that everybody gets an even quality experience when it comes to opportunity? Okay, I'm going to keep going. Rushing the quarterback, as you might have seen in the video that we showed, there is a poly spot for the line of scrimmage. There's another poly spot about 7 yards away from the line of scrimmage. They have to rush from behind that poly spot 7 yards away to rush the quarterback. I initially will say that when I started officiating games for Anger, I was like, 7 yards, that's it? It's enough. It's plenty enough because most teams take the ball from shotgun. So they're probably another 3, 4, 5 yards away. You're talking anywhere between 8 to 12 yards in distance there. And so it's definitely enough, and it gives your quarterback enough time to get the ball and make decisions while still affording the opportunity to sack the quarterback if you have someone that's good at rushing the quarterback. Blocking. This is where it comes up. We have non-contact blocking. Essentially, think of our blocking like setting a pick in basketball. Your hands have to either be behind your back or at your side. There's no hands out. There's no grabbing. There's no sticking legs out. That's considered tripping. What blocking comes down to is ideal blocking is hands behind your back, setting a pick like in basketball, and you can slide to obstruct a rusher, but you cannot get in their way to the point where you're making collision. Some additional rules, just so you know, basic rules of the game. Games are 2 20-minute halves, and they're running clocks up until the last minute of each half. Last minute of each half, it's typical 2-minute warning rules. Whenever there's a dead ball, clock stops. Overtime, if you have detailed overtime questions, as of now, I will turn you to Melissa Anger, because overtime is fun in every sport. But again, the team that started with the first overtime possession will possess the ball in the second and next overtime. It's typical. It's kind of like college, Anger.
So pretty much they do a coin toss. Each team gets 4 downs to get from midfield to score. Okay.
Yeah.
If there's an interception, game is over right then and there. The team that intercepted it wins. If only one team scores, obviously that team is the one that scores or the one that wins. If neither team scores, it goes by yards gained. So like if one team gained 5 yards and the other team gained 15, the team that gained the most wins the game.
So essentially what it is it's college football overtime, but it's got some other modifiers to it so that we don't go into quadruple overtimes. While those are super fun and super great, we only have so many hours in a day to run competitions and games. So we have some additional modifiers, and we would have that as part of our cheat sheet at any competition as well. Scoring, touchdowns are 6 points, and then you can choose to go for 1 from the 6-yard line or 2 from the 12-yard line. Those are your options. No field goals. You got to run some sort of play to get your extra points. Running the ball, quarterback cannot run, cannot advance it across the line of scrimmage at any point. Even if they're rushed by the passer rusher, they cannot run it. Again, with ball carriers, they have to make an effort to avoid defenders that have established position. We're trying to limit contact as much as possible. And then again, when the ball snapped inside the no run zones, they can't run it. They have to throw it. While we're at this point, I will mention when I officiated high-level flag football teams for Melissa Anger, there's going to be some contact. We try to keep it as no contact as possible, but the reality of it is there's going to be some bumping, there's going to be some running into each other. Hence why we have everybody wear mouth guards. Hence why we have our athletes train as much as we do. Passing and receiving, the note that is here, essentially ineligible receiver is something that we do. If you step out of bounds as a wide receiver or a pass eligible target, you can't be the first one to touch the ball when it comes back into play. Typical football rules. Screen blocking, mentioned blocking before. When it comes to penalties, essentially everything that we do is a 5-yard penalty, except for unsportsmanlike conduct. They're 10-yard penalties. If you get a penalty within 5 yards of your own end zone, it's half the distance to the end zone. Pretty typical football stuff. One thing that was added back into flag football is the ball carrier can spin to avoid defenders. The biggest thing that does get called for running the ball, though, is flag guarding. So one of the training points for coaches' education that we really push, and I know Melissa Angers really pushed, is running the ball in particular to avoid flag guarding, which is, smacking hands out of the way, stiff arms, anything crazy like that. Tend to coach to carry the ball high so that your flags are available to be pulled. Do you want to talk about that a little bit more, Anger?
Yeah, so flag guarding is always a big thing because how people run, their hands go past their waist typically when they run. That is flag guarding because they are blocking their flags. So teaching them to run with their hands up is always a very difficult thing that coaches have to do because, everyone's in their mindset of how they run. And so this is a whole different way of running. Some other flag guarding. So spinning used to be flag guarding. It's not anymore and is the best thing ever. I love it. It's so cool to watch them spin to get away. Jumping over a defender, stiff arming, anything like that. Like Zach said, slapping hands away. That's all flag guarding, which is not allowed. It is a penalty.
Yep. And then again, when it comes to coaches' education, we'll talk about various blocking, but blocking pretty much stays the same. It's non-contact blocking. It's about how you move and how you set yourself. Essentially, it's basketball pick blocking. Okay, those are not even remotely all of the rules. Those are some of the high-level important rules that we want to get to you potentially for decision-making, especially the equipment rules and the equipment you may need, and how the field setup is so you can get a sense of what field space you will need. Questions, comments, concerns when it comes to rules?
So can I say something real fast, Zach?
Yeah, of course.
So I didn't say this when he brought up about the quarterback not being able to run. They're not allowed to run, obviously, as mentioned. Shuffle passes are not allowed either. They have to go forward. They cannot go backwards or anything like that. With the quarterback, if they hand it off, they can become an eligible receiver. So they can't run the ball over the line of scrimmage, but if they do not have the ball in their hands because they've handed it off to someone, that the quarterback can now become an eligible receiver. The center can be an eligible receiver after they take one step off of the line of scrimmage backwards. They can then run forward and become a receiver as well. So those are some big things that a lot of our coaches still struggle with in the community program. They're getting better at it because it's still some new stuff, but there's a lot of fun trick plays you can do, a lot of cool 3 handoffs and fakes and everything like that. It is a really cool. They did upgrade the rules a lot to make it so the coaches have a little bit more creativity with their plays and stuff like that for offense.
So while you're thinking about all your trick plays now, any questions on rules, again, equipment that's potentially needed, field space that's needed, anything like that?
So I will say when we had our required qualifier for the community program, on one football field, we had 3 full-size fields, our fields, as well as enough room for the individual skills competition, which is 5 stations. I mean, that tells you, it seems like that makes our fields look and sound really, really small. but they go side to side, sideline to sideline, and it goes a little bit past the actual field, but not much. And I mean, like we said, you can fit 3 fields on there comfortably.
Anger, can you do me a favor? I should have put them in here. Can you highlight what the skills stations are so people know?
Sure. So we don't use the skill stations that are in the SOI rulebook. During COVID, we created what we called our high level skills. So there's the 40-yard dash, self-explanatory. How fast can you run 40 yards? We have the pass for distance, which is we just have cones lined up with markers. How far can you throw it? That's how many points you get. It was for the farthest throw. There is the footwork station, which, as Zach mentioned, we're looking to replace with a catching station. We don't currently have a catching station. As I mentioned, these were created during COVID. So during COVID, with our protocols, we couldn't catch the ball thrown by someone else. We also have target pass, which is there's 3 targets at 3 different distances. Each target is worth a different amount of points. They get 3 throws. They can throw to any target they want to get as many points as they want. Obviously, the closer ones are less points. Further ones away are more points. And then the last station is a flag pulling station. So we have the targets where we put flag belts on, and they are timed. They have to run out, pull one flag, run back, drop it off, go get the next one back, third one back. And all the flags are at different distances as well. And based off of their time is how many points they get.
Yeah, and don't also be afraid of what we've modified our skills to, because Anger called them high level skills. We needed something to rename them to. We have plenty of flag football athletes that I would not consider high level, high functioning athletes that participate in the skills and do a really good job and have a really great time. Similar to a conversation I had earlier today with somebody about, individuals from Garrett County with a bocce team. It was a lower ability athlete, but because she took her time and, walked to the line, didn't get all worked up, really had some good pace, and it was slower pace to it. She was the best bocce player that was there. So again, some of these things are obviously timed, but some of them are also precision based. So it's one of those things where, depending on what the individual athlete's skill set is, they could score really high in one and not do so great in the other and know what they have to work on. So the skill stations are very much accessible for a varying level of athlete as well.
Yeah, and we did adjust them this past year, maybe last year. Once we started back up again, we did adjust it to better suit the lower or just any athlete, any ability athlete. For example, the target pass, the original rules was they had to have 1 shot at each target. We then switched it to you get 3 throws, throw at whatever target you want. So the athletes that couldn't throw very far always went for that 5-yard target because it's closer. Even though it's only 1 point, they could still get up to 3 points for hitting that target. Whereas some of the higher athletes would go for that 20-yard one that's worth, I think, 7 points and not hit any of them. And so the person that went for the 5-yard got more points than the higher athlete. So we did adjust it a little bit so that so any athlete could excel at these skills.
Cool. Again, follow up on questions for rules, equipment needed, field space needed, individual skills, now that we've talked about them a little as well. Okay, we'll keep moving. So just some expectations for implementation. Want to set some very base level expectations of, if we move forward with this for any districts, what we kind of need to work on as a team. There's going to be aspects for you as district reps in districts that need to do some fact finding and information finding for us, so we can get back together and make some decisions on how we can support you the best we can. So SOMD from our end, the things that we will provide as part of the expectations is just like any other season for IUS, we will provide a coach's rule book and a guide with the rules following the SOI flag rules, along with any Special Olympics Maryland modifications. Only real modification, again, is roster size, nothing to do with competition. We will provide a district tournament or a competition guide, just like we do with any other sports season, to help you plan a district tournament or competition. We will provide training for you as district reps and coaches, like we talked about in the beginning, rules training, sport training, whatever it may be that you need to feel comfortable and that we need to feel comfortable to put your athletes in the best place to succeed. We'll provide that and help you do that. We will provide equipment support after district reps. You guys confirm with your district that you don't have certain equipment or you can't procure certain equipment based on your athletic department budget or whatever it may be. We're actually optimistic with the choice of flag football that most schools have football in the first place, and that the football team may be willing to share or work with you to support growing flag football in their school as well. I do know that MPSSAA at 1.2 was very much looking into how to put on the table women's flag football as a potential recreational and hopefully one day varsity sport. So there might also be support from there. I'm hoping I can talk to the football team as part of the MPSSAA committee when I get to see them in December. Maybe they can help us as well. I will say we're also exploring different avenues of different funding resources and different grants and support from different organizations that might be able to help us as well. But of course, we want you to work with your athletic directors and your athletic supervisors to find out what do we have in our districts first to support this type of programming. And then again, transparent and consistent communication with season outlines and expectations for the fall demo season. If you are a district that chooses to go forward with flag football, we are more than likely going to have some sort of homework for all of us between now and a meeting in sometime in January. We will probably have homework and things that we need to work on and talk about sometime between January and March. And then we'll have some stuff that we got to work on and talk about between March and June when we have our preseason webinar. Again, we're going to work with you. We're going to have constant communication. We're going to take feedback that you guys have. In no way, shape, or form do we think we have the perfect formula for this. I'd like to think that we have a good system in the community program. I like to think that I've looked into this well enough and had enough conversation with you guys that we have a good plan. But to build a solid foundation, it's going to take us all as a team and everybody that's invested in football to get us there. So district commitments is we would want you to commit to participating in the flag demo season, like absolutely fully 100% by that June district rep meeting. We would love for you to tell us if you say yes and then change your mind and want to go back to tennis sooner than that. But again, we want to make sure by that June meeting that you are 100% in as a district if you choose to do flag football, so we know how we're going to proceed in the fall season. Again, we want you to actively engage your school district athletic supervisors and directors for field space for training and competition. Field space is always at a premium, especially in the fall there. Equipment sharing with unified sports teams. If your varsity football team, if your physical education departments are willing to share equipment that they may already have, 40 football flag belts that they have for just general physical education that you guys can borrow. They may have youth footballs, they may have pylons, whatever it may be, working with your athletic directors and athletic supervisors, working with your athletic directors and supervisors for officials on competition days. Full transparency with you guys, that is the biggest thing we struggle with for community flag football is consistency in officials. Anger this year did a great job working with Towson University to get their officials from intramurals to come out.
University of Maryland.
University of Maryland. I thought it was Towson University.
Towson's next year.
So we work with the universities across the state of Maryland to use their intramural officials. But again, officials is one thing that's tough to find. So we would want to have you work with your athletic directors on that. And then transportation support for teams. You guys already do that in a given sports season, but again, buses ain't getting any easier, it seems like, anytime soon. So continue to think about that when it comes to a new sport as well. Again, we would want you to commit to the required trainings for district reps and coaches. We want safety, we want good training. We will support and help you run all of them. We just need you guys to commit to hosting them and setting up a date for them. And then again, from your end, transparent and consistent communication with us as well, because the more we communicate, the more we're going to get done, the better the season we're going to have. And I don't think you guys hearing communication from me is a surprise. That's every webinar that I have. That's the biggest thing that I harp on as well. Questions with expectations, one way or the other, something that we're missing, something that might be too much of an ask, anything that you can think of?
So I will say that I've spoken with a lot of my community coaches about starting flag football in the high schools, and they are very excited. Like, a lot of them are more than willing to come out and help with things, whether it's trainings or practices to get you started, giving you drills. We have coaches that will travel. We have coaches that are more than willing to help get things started. They're very, very excited. So one good way to merge. And I think you guys, I mean, everyone on this webinar knows me from when I did some IUS stuff a few years ago. I'm always here to help with as much as I can. Zach has been a huge help to me by stepping in officiating, so he knows the rules for the most part. So lean on Zach, lean on me. We're here to help.
Yeah, again, that's one thing we're always going to be here for, is to support you guys. We have a very good amount of resources, especially when it comes to people resources, when it comes to flag football. So that is one thing, for quite honestly, the first time, that I'm not worried about if we implement this, is having the people to support it and, you know, be there to get you guys up and going. So with that said, again, I talked about this in the beginning. I didn't have a better wording for this than vote for implementation. I just want to see and get your feeling if at this point there are districts that are ready to say, yes, we want to do flag football. So I know who we can continue communication with and continue meeting with when it comes to moving on towards a demo season for the fall of 23. We have some teams that have already decided that they're staying tennis. I know Michelle, who's on the call, has expressed her optimism of Frederick at some point potentially being able to do both because of the size of their district. And then there are some districts that are no fall participation, that they do allied sports or some sort of unified adaptive education, physical education in their own way. So I just wanted to check in. Roy, I know you're on the call. How are you feeling when it comes to this? Do you have questions? Do you feel one way or the other that we can continue conversation?
Yeah, I'd say at the moment I would be a yes.
Okay.
I think there's been a lot of interest in Allegheny, Garrett County with this, so I'd like to continue with it.
Okay. So I will update that on the chart. Barb, you're next up there. I know we've had some conversation both ways for you. I know even Coach Kamler said, you know, flag football would be interesting. Do you have a sense one way or the other at this point, which way you may lean?
No, I'd like you, once you send this, I'm going to share it with Eric, see what his feeling is. Talk to some of the other coaches and try and make a decision. But I think it's very interesting. I'm just not sure of the whole implementation with
For sure.
field access. That's one thing. A lot of people already have said their schools, like, there's no open fields for them to practice. Or the thing tonight where I saw you put all the lines on the football field. If we did that to the football field, I'm afraid and then they have a football game on Friday night, and there's all these lines that, you know, is not anything to do with their football. That could be an issue. So
Barb, I will tell you, during our qualifiers, we just put cones on the sideline to mark the no run zones. We do not put lines on the
you don't do the lines like that?
Yeah.
Okay.
Only at the state tournament do we do that, because we're on
Okay.
grass.
All right. Cool.
Oh, they'd kill us if we did that to their football field.
Yeah.
No.
Howard County would hunt us down and scalp
Yes.
us for painting on their fields. They would literally take it out of our hides.
Gotcha.
But yeah, no, that's a really good point. Again, the field lineup that I showed you guys today is the like ideal from the rule book, but we've done some modifications, like Anger said, to get fields on really nice turf fields that we'll never be able to paint lines on, but we want our athletes to get access to those fields.
Cool. All right.
And again, if your district feels strongly about going one way or the other, or if field space is potentially the holdup, let me know before you necessarily yay or nay or nix something on that, because we can also talk to other resources that we may have out and about in your area as well.
Sounds good.
All right, Tanisha, I know you started middle school flag football, so I have a perception of your feeling on this.
Well, ironically, I do have a question. So it's not, as of right now, it's tennis or football, or tennis and flag football, or could it be both at some point?
So no. So tennis isn't going anywhere. This is not saying that we are dropping tennis for flag football. We are going to implement flag football if we have enough districts alongside tennis in the fall season, because fall only offers one sport, unlike the other two seasons. So Michelle from District 3 in Frederick there is considering at some point that because of the size of the district in Frederick, they may do both sports. Barb is looking at, because of the size of her district, more than likely they have to pick one or the other, but we're not taking tennis off the board. So both options are on the board. Districts can go one or the other. Districts can go both. But this is for implementation of a new sport to create more opportunities for IUS, not take one away.
Okay. Well, ironically, while I was super excited and like, yeah, this is great, this is something they would want to do, my pocket of kids in schools are actually wanting to just stick with tennis.
Okay.
And then looking and asking the questions, some of the things that you brought up. Number one, our district is one of the ones that has been working with MPSSAA and the NFL to implement girls flag football at the high school level.
Yep.
And starting kind of like a pilot, and it was supposed to start in the spring, but it kind of got pushed back a little bit. So considering that's where we are, and then we also don't want to, the girls, well, I'm saying girls, but many, because it would be during that fall season, we're concerned that the girls that play will take away from our high school team. So like volleyball and things like that, because those girls typically want to play football, well, flag football. And then some of the boys, like who don't make some of their traditional teams, may try to do both. And so it may be hard for us to implement at first, just with fidelity, until we have like a little bit more solid tracking system.
Yep.
Because I know that athletes they're going to play both, and they can't.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, no, so that's cool. That's fine with me. A question I have for you as well is, I know there's, we reach through Unified Sports 5 or 6 schools that are really strong participants in Baltimore City right now. Are there schools that don't participate in Unified Sports that offering this would potentially get them on board as opposed to tennis?
I really only think probably 3 of the schools.
Okay.
And I'm not sure, and it's something we can talk about, because I'm just not sure. While I would like it for those 3, I'm just not sure how that will work in terms of support for like just human capital, running tennis and flag football,
and middle schools and young athlete in elementary schools. Come on, Tanisha,
right.
Get it together.
Right. So while that is something to consider. So maybe if you could put us down for a pilot, because then I could essentially pilot it with those schools, that you talked about, where they traditionally act like they don't have any students that would qualify for Unified, even though I've shown them their runs. But I think that's a good idea, to be able to just pilot it with those schools and maybe be able to run it at a smaller level.
Yeah, and that requires us giving you additional support and manpower and stuff like that. So that's an additional conversation we have. But again, I wanted to get a general sense from you, and that's exactly what I got. I appreciate it.
Right. Well, I'll say then if you put us down, then we could commit to the pilot part of
Yeah.
it. So,
Okay. I have you down for tennis, but interested in a pilot for additional schools.
yes, that'll
So
work.
we'll continue that conversation. Again, because I want to make sure we get you enough support that we're not continuing to spread you thinner and thinner by introducing a pilot as well. But again, we will continue that conversation as part of it.
Got you. Okay.
And then Michelle, I know you're on here. I know you were kind of in listen mode after I talked to you earlier. I have you guys down as more than likely staying tennis, but optimistic that down the line, implementation of flag football will be great.
I think we would want to look at something else, but I think right now as a county, we have too many things going on athletically to add something new right now.
Yeah. All right.
So no, you're absolutely correct.
Okay. I do need to follow up with a couple other district reps to see where they land. But again, like I said, this isn't necessarily a vote for implementation of one way or the other. It's more to get a sense of what districts want to do it, so we can start doing it in districts, start building the foundation and lay the foundation if other districts want to convert over down the line, if they want to run both, the opportunity is there. And so I will continue the conversation with a few other people. I will do a follow-up email to this, and it will be kind of if you said yes, or you are relatively interested via additional conversations with people in your district that you need to have first, like Barb said, or a pilot program like Tanisha said, I will send an email to all the district reps saying, hey, we had our conversation. This is some of the outcomes. Here's the slide deck again. Here's the rules again. Moving forward, after that email goes out, I will just be communicating flag football interest to people that have expressed interest moving forward. If, like Michelle, you would like to stay on the info loop, even though you're not planning on going forward with it for fall of 23, just let me know, and I will keep you all on all those communications as well. I just don't want to burden other district reps that have said, no, we're not interested with perpetual flag football emails. So with that said, final questions, comments, concerns? Any final thoughts? Anything that we didn't cover that you may have a question of? Even if you don't have it now, you can text me, email me, call me, send me smoke signals, whatever works for you. I'm fine with any of them. I ain't hearing nothing. I ain't going to keep you for the sake of keeping you. You guys know that's not how I go. Thank you for being on here tonight. I appreciate you guys coming and listening to the information. I appreciate some of your feedback. And again, any questions, any ideas that you have, we're more than open to having conversations. That's how we got to this conversation in the first point. And I want to keep that channel of communication open for you guys to feel comfortable to ask questions and propose new ideas, because without you guys doing that, we keep going in the same circle. We want to expand our circle. We want to bring in more athletes. We want to get more unified partners. We want to offer more things that the kids want, so we get more participation, so more kids get involved, and we just have sports and have a good time across the board. Other than that, that's it. I'm going to stop the share. I'm going to stop the record. And if anybody has more questions,